All right, we're live. Welcome to the Software Circus 5-year reunion. Jamie, how's
Good
things?
morning. Hello, Mark.
I see that, as per usual, I put a lot more effort into my outfit.
Look at my hat. I think it suits me. It's because you've always been a bit more vain than I have, Mark. You don't look 5 years older, mate.
I hear that we've got 500, 600 people watching live, which is more than we've ever had in attendance physically. And I think we've got 1,300 people registered. So it's going to climb throughout the day, probably as the Americans come online. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for showing up to this. We've got a lot to get through today, but first, since it's the 5-year anniversary, Jamie and I were going to reminisce a little bit, tell you something about the history. This all kicked off in Amsterdam. I think we probably decided to do it about 6 weeks before the conference happened, which in retrospect was a little bit insane. We were sat at the Container Solutions offices in Amsterdam, central Amsterdam. And we'd been running the Software Circus meetup for a while. The Software Circus meetup was about getting away from two things. One was meetups that were always about the same thing. I didn't want to go to a Java meetup every week. Who does? So we wanted to create a place that we said at the time was like Hacker News Online, where we'd just have talks about anything that was from tech, or sometimes not even from tech, and that was interesting. And we also wanted to make fun and inclusiveness front and center. A lot of the meetups we went to at the time are really about coming in, grabbing a bit of pizza, sitting down, listening to a talk and going home. And we wanted to see what we could do to, just make the evenings more enjoyable.
We wanted to get away from like brush steel product demos, didn't we, Mark? So there's a lot of corporate conferences and meetups where you'd see a product demo, extremely corporate, and people didn't feel they were learning anything. I think it was more like 10 weeks before the conference started, but it was really a crazy rush job. What would happen if we tried to do this? And then once it started to build momentum, it sort of went from there, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so let's say it was 10 weeks out. We basically had never done a conference before. We didn't know where we were going to do it. We didn't have any attendees or sponsors or speakers.
Or speakers, yeah.
And the amazing thing is that if you look at the caliber of speakers today, a lot of them went out on a limb and helped us out the first time round, which I know you were instrumental in, Jamie.
Well, so I'd got introduced to Adrian Cockcroft, but I'd never actually met him. Now, I think he knew Adrian Moat from Container Solutions, and mainly because they were both called Adrian, they'd found each other. And so they were a minority group within tech, the Adrians. So that at one point, there was Adrian Collier, Adrian Cole, Adrian Cockcroft, and Adrian Moat, and they were all hanging out, and they were going to do an Adrian Con. That was actually tabled as a serious idea. And Adrian Cockcroft, after the introduction, had said, yeah, I'll do the keynote. And I mean, we'd said to him, you're doing us a huge, huge favor. And then once Adrian had put his hand up, and he was extremely generous with both his time and his coaching and making introductions. And once Adrian Cockcroft had said, I'm in, then things started to snowball. And then sponsors were like, well, we'll give you money. Right. And then once Adrian was there, and then Toby got on board as the keynote, and Ken Owens, and then, of course, Kelsey. And it was during Software Circus, Kelsey did his now famous Tetris talk. And I believe it was for the first time those 5 years ago in Amsterdam.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've tried to, obviously everything's going virtual at the moment. And I feel like this focus on fun is really going to help us out, because I've been to quite a few virtual events, and you see the people are really trying to get some more stuff in there. Now, we're not going to do what we usually have. I'm going to hunt down the picture later on Twitter somewhere of when we didn't tell Kelsey we're going to set off the confetti cannons just as he was coming on stage. And I've been cowering behind the lectern. But as you can see, we've done a lot of other things to make it interactive and fun today. In some ways, inspired by some of the pioneering work they did at the Virtual Rejects conference a few weeks ago. But it still feels a little bit like, I mean, normally there's been all sorts of smoke and things on stage, and now I'm stood in front of a bunch of people physically. And now it feels like we're doing a radio show, which isn't the first time for Jamie and I.
That's true. That's true. We used to present the English breakfast, didn't we, in Amsterdam? So we have a bit of experience with that.
Jamie and I somehow met through doing a volunteer radio show on Tuesday mornings in Amsterdam, which was basically just for the expat community. And I think we did that show for 2 years together before we even knew that we both worked in software.
That's true. Yeah.
So we were obviously having a lot of fun if we didn't even talk about work.
And the radio show was set up for one purpose, wasn't it? So, because we were sick of moaning expats, moaning about the Netherlands. And one of the drivers of the show was to try to educate the expat community into what was going on in Amsterdam and further afield in Holland. So I guess pre-Software Circus, that was our first serious attempt at engaging with the community.
That's
because
right.
Because we didn't get paid for that show, did we? Up at 4 o'clock every morning.
Yeah. So because we're experienced, if we don't do a good job today, we've got absolutely no excuse.
No excuse.
One of the things we've always tried to do at Software Circus, and you'll see that in the lineup today when I start talking through some of the activities that are coming up, is to try and do not only things that are fun, but also things that you wouldn't normally find at a software conference. And Jamie, you scored as our biggest non-software speaker at the first Software Circus. Do you want to
That's
tell
right. Yeah, that is right, Mark. Right. So of course, that is what we were trying to do. So we wanted to talk about software, but also hardware, management, philosophy. And so it was a very broad church that we were trying to build. And just as Software Circus was kicking off, David Allen, the guy who wrote Getting Things Done, the book, had moved to Amsterdam. Now, David's extremely famous. I think he's got millions of followers on Twitter, and that book is a bestseller. Anyway, I reached out and said to him, I'm the CEO of Container Solutions, which was true, I was, but it wasn't a massive company. There was only 5 of us at the time. And I said, welcome to Amsterdam. Is there anything we can help you with? And he replied, and he said, I'd love to see the city. And so we took him on a bike tour. We took his wife on a bike tour. We introduced him to, different people. He had a fantastic time. And then I sort of plucked up the courage and said, David, would you speak at Software Circus? By far our most famous speaker. And what would you charge? And he said, well, I've got 2 prices. I've got £30,000 talk or 30,000 euros or 0. Which one would you like? And I was like, think we're probably going to take the 0 option, if that's okay. And anyway, he was very humble and very good about it. And he said, I don't want to take the main room. I don't want to dominate the conference. So let the original speaker stay in a big room and I'll just do the small room. Now, what happened is, poor I don't want to mention their name because I don't want to embarrass them, but that was a sponsor slot. And the name of the sponsor rhymes with Dicromoft. So poor Dicromoft, we're in the room expecting to address a few hundred people. And unfortunately, what everybody had done is crammed into one room to see David Allen. And it was standing room only. It was absolutely packed. And it was a brilliant, brilliant talk. So that was a brilliant scalp for the first Software Circus.
Right. That has now got me in the mood. So what are we actually looking at today? There's a lot going on. This is definitely the longest conference we've ever done. So let me just run through a few of the highlights for you. We've got 12.5 hours of content run from 10 a.m. Amsterdam, I suppose that would be, until 10:30 at night. If you're not already yet familiar with the Brella platform, you need to get in there first to be able to view any of this. I'm not sure if it's being live streamed elsewhere. If you are hearing about this on Twitter, you need to go to softwarecircus.io and sign up and get in there. There's a virtual exhibition floor, and I'm going to come back to our sponsors in a moment. But obviously, one of the challenges with moving to a virtual event is that often it's bankrolled through the generosity of the sponsors. And the sponsors really enjoy the sort of physical contact that they get with the people, so they can tell them about what they've been doing. And obviously that doesn't work here. But what we've done is create a virtual exhibition floor. You can find that in Brella somewhere on the right and go and have a look. The sponsors will be staffing their booths all day. You can go and have a chat with them. I'm not 100% sure how it works, but I'm sure you can figure it out. The schedule is both in Brella and it's also on softwarecircus.io/schedule. It's worth noting that we have 3 different types of tracks. There's the main track, this one, where there's going to be keynotes and then a whole bunch of talks. There's a second track for talks, and there's a fun track. I'm going to come back to some of those things later. In all, we've got 5 keynotes, 1 panel, 16 30-minute talks, and 7 15-minute lightning talks. So at some point today, I'm going to have to get a power nap in while someone's talking. quick shout out to some of the speakers that you've probably already seen. Obviously, Jamie's mentioned Kelsey and Adrian. Pinny's here, who spoke at the first one. Adrian Mowat spoke at the first one. Jamie spoke at the first one. Justin Cormack spoke at the first one. But we've also got a bunch of new names: Liz Rice, Sam Newman, Ian Coldwater, Daniel Bryan, and Curry. I don't think was at the first one, but was already a friend of ours.
And Anne Curry was at the first one with her husband John. I don't remember if Anne spoke, but back then she was doing microscaling. So I'm sure if she's listening, she'll ping us on Twitter now.
Right. Also, I'm going to be emceeing the main track for the day, but we also have another fantastic MC on the second track, who's Leon Lee. So you're going to meet her at some point. Now, a quick word about the sponsors. You're going to notice a lot of names in here that you see at a lot of these fun conferences, because they've all got, I think, the right attitude for supporting things like this, which are to a certain extent commercial, but mainly around the community. So obviously, Container Solutions, Packet, OfferZen, Rancher, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, Honeycomb.io, Giant Swarm, Kinfolk, the German Massive, Aqua, and then CloudBees. We've got 3 minutes left until we're going to introduce the first keynote of the day, who's Liz Rice. So I just want to go through a few more of the activities quickly. Besides the amazing talks, we've also got a costume contest. Now, obviously, that's already sort of begun, and obviously, I've won round one. But we're going to be talking about that with Carla and some of the others later on, because people will be submitting their costumes to Twitter. I think it's already beginning, and that's going to be winning a prize. One of the things you will have seen from the initial software circus was that we've always tried to include music. So we're going to be having live music throughout the day. Probably some of it's pre-recorded, some of it's live. We've got yoga, DJ sets. Someone's going to be graphic recording all of the keynotes and putting that up on Twitter and sending that out. There's a relaxation session, and there's raffles. The important one that I really want to talk about, because I'm going to skip to now because there's too many things to get to, is our code of conduct, which I can't find at the moment. Hold on, where is it? MC Guide. When we started in 2015, it was kind of new to have a code of conduct at the time, but it's something we've always wanted to support. It's a little bit different when we're doing it here virtually. It's new for us, and we're not sure how that's going to work. You can find it on softwarecircus.io, but the rules are basically clear, right? It should be pretty obvious, and unfortunately sometimes it isn't, how to behave when you're with other people. If you're feeling in any way like someone's behaving to you with you in a way that you're not enjoying, go to the website, find the code of conduct page, and reach out to somebody. We've got about 30 seconds left. So, Jamie, any final thoughts before we welcome Liz Rice to the stage?
No, only to follow up on the code of conduct. As a community, we are, of course, experimenting with this, with a code of conduct for an online event. But obviously, the key is to try to be kind and try to be measured with each other. As Mark said, the code of conduct, which I've just shared in my Twitter stream, lays that out. If for some reason you can't find it or you're confused, you can send a DM to me, a DM to Carla, or a DM to Mark, and we will swiftly deal with any questions or concerns that people have had.
Excellent. Thank you,
other than that, Mark, I would say bravo on your introduction and bravo on your costume. It was good to be back in the saddle again.
Yeah, absolutely. It was nice to go a little bit down memory lane. Let's kick it off with our first keynote, shall we?
Indeed.